Welcome to the Sacred Doorway podcast. Today, I'm sitting with Sue Townsend, intuitive, medium, and channeled writing instructor, to discuss the language of inspiration. I know that you do a beautiful class on inspirational writing. So tell us a little bit about how you got inspired, first of all, to do a class like that, and then how the class works.
Okay, well, what happened was it's going back to when we were all caught up in the COVID situation and we had this lockdown going on, and it was like that realization that we can't go out to circle and all this type of stuff anymore. And then the idea just came, okay, well, let's do this online. So we started off, we were very inexperienced, a few of us. We decided to have our own little circle and we started offering it online, and we asked people to come along just to be the sitters, if you like, to give us some practice. And there, from there, because it became quite extended, other ideas popped in. So one was the inspirational writing. I did a similar thing with art. It wasn't anything fancy, the art, and I'll tell you a little story about that later. And also, I also did a chat hour as well with different people, and that also fed into another situation where they were interviewed by somebody else. So it was just experimental, really. And I feel behind it all was spirit giving the prompts and the inspiration, and just feeling, well, we're sitting here twiddling our fingers, and I'm not really a homebody wanting to do lots of housework and stuff. I think I give up on that because of the cats and the dogs, and you think I can't be a freak about housework because it doesn't stay that tidy. So the inspirational writing, what I found was I would put the title of the group like inspirational writing, and then it would be surprising. People would come along and they'd not done this before, and all I was going to do was offer a couple of prompts and a picture and leave them like 30-35 minutes, see what transpired. And it was just amazing the amount of information that came through, and even now you can tell that it comes from a different source because it's a different language. And for some people it's also a healing process where we have the opportunity to share, but there's no obligation, and it's about healing. And so I feel, as with all the spaces that I offer, it's literally offering the space for facilitating that space, and spirit come in and they work with us in the way they want to work with us. And it's as simple as that, really.
I love that you talk about the healing aspect, because I find that to be the case in so many different areas of spirituality and different practices that people do. And I don't think that a lot of people realize how healing it is for them to say, give a mediumship reading. Just yesterday, I was with somebody who we talked about their animal, of all things, and how healing that was, just to be able to talk about a memory and then feel those feelings that you feel when you remember, those experiences that you've had with a loved one. Sue, let me ask you this, even in your own class, if somebody were to ask you, how do I even know what to write down? What would you suggest to somebody that's like, I'd like to maybe even start automatic writing, which is kind of what I think about when you talk about inspirational writing, but we'll say any kind of inspirational writing, and they're not really sure how to get started. What kind of advice do you normally give your students?
Well, sometimes we start with a meditation, but generally, because of the people who come on, they've either done this before now or one or two haven't, so I'll explain beforehand. And I do mention that they might like to try using their non-dominant hand to just allow them to flow. And really, it's not really about teaching it. It's literally about handing the space over and saying, just allow, just let go and see what comes down, right? The first thing comes into your head if you want to, and just get started. That's the whole point of the prompts, because I say you can either use them or not, go right off piste and allow it to come through. And when people, they might write about the angels, or sometimes it can sound as if their guide's been from a particularly religious life. that type of thing. And sometimes the poetry comes through. It's so beautiful, and it's not about comparing with each other. So I'm very flexible in a way that I don't want to put any pressure on people. I want people to allow themselves to work with their own heart, if that's where they're starting from, or their guides and inspires, however they want to work and open up, just to let them experiment and see what happens. And this is what I love about the flow of it, just leaving it and seeing what happens. And the beauty of it is when somebody's not done this before and they find that words have flowed, and they think these aren't my words, and it's just that wonder that it's kick-started something. And I've had quite a few people mention over the years now, because it has been years, that little group, that group I started off on, it set me on a journey, and I write every day or every other day or whatever it is. And to me, that's the pleasure, that's the delight.
Right.
You know, it's not a personal thing. It's just the surprise and the connection with spirit, and the delight that somebody who's come along that have felt for themselves and thought, I can do this with my inspiration, my guides, my channel.
I love that. I love that. It's interesting, I've had similar experiences with writing, because if you go in with that intention that you want some sort of inspiration, you'll just start writing about whatever it is, your day, what you're thinking about. And then all of a sudden it starts to become really profound. And you're like, where did this come from? That's what I love about that whole experience, that whole meditative, my mind is out of the way and I'm just letting it flow. So you mentioned something that's really interesting, because I've seen that used in other areas as well when we're trying to be inspired or get our mind out of the way. You talked about using your left hand or your non-dominant hand. What do you find that does for people?
That takes out using the logical mind to some extent. There might be the focus on, oh gosh, I'm trying to write here. But this is where it's about encouraging people to be at that place, at that stage of really letting go and seeing what happens on the paper. And it might just be a spider's crawl down the page. It doesn't matter. It's a start. If somebody wants to pursue that, it is making the start. And it's surprising how it can take time. I've been told somebody sat like that for months before anything happened. So it's not a quick fix in any way. But it's an experiment, and it's just another way of connecting with spirit and say, I'd like to do this because then I know it's not me. Just trying to be as open as possible to get themselves out of the way. If they think they can be out of the way by using the non-dominant hand, brilliant.
Excellent. Excellent. And that's really a lot of it too, when we're thinking about inspiration, isn't it? It's getting our analytical mind out of the way.
It's just having a go. And I just want to briefly mention where I'd mentioned one or two of the other groups in the COVID time about the art side of things. It wasn't about being fabulous at drawing art. And there was one person on there who hadn't been able to have the coloured pencils and pens as a child. So they were very nervous. They gave it a go. Quite a long time later, probably nearly 2 years later, I got a message to say that they'd now started painting. Oh. Now that touches my soul.
Right.
And it's the same with the writing. It's the same sort of thing with the writing. Never done that before. And yet something happens, something opens up, and you just think, I can feel quite emotional about that. And it's not just a human thing. I know that's a spiritual thing where you think, wow, this is really opening up for somebody.
I love that about the art too, and we'll get to that next, because that's actually something I wanted to talk to you about as well. But I've seen people do the same thing, like you're talking about, to get themselves out of the way, not worry about what it looks like. It doesn't have to be your best piece of art, which is so hard as an artist to show people things, and you're like, well, it's just a scribble. But it was the intent, and it was free flowing, and you're letting things through. I do work sometimes with another friend who had talked about a technique that she had used one time where they sat in the dark. They sat in the dark and tried to draw, or draw with their non-dominant hand. right? With like the writing. And it is interesting when we can get that analytical brain out of the way. Sometimes it really does help the flow happen. One of the things that I've seen you do, which I love because I do it a little bit, probably not as well as you, but I see that you often, when you're inspired, will create line drawings, or I call them doodles, but basically you're documenting, right, what you've seen. When did that start for you, and what does that do for you when you're able to get that down on paper?
It's probably been around me for longer than I realised. And I first started to become aware of it when, again, it's during the COVID time. I mean, this brought people together in so many different ways.
Exactly.
And I
Exactly.
started going on the Minorca Consciousness group. And I found then that apparently I was drawing energies. And then I realised that now and again, with mediumship, I would draw a rough sketch of a face. It's more of a diagram, it's not a portrait. And then around it, there'd be a load of information about the person. So gradually, it's just been something that's evolved, and that's really all I can say about it. I see the image. Sometimes I'm sketching before we even start the session. I start scribbling in the corner, then realise that we've had maybe a channeling session or whatever we've chosen to do, if I'm participating in a group. And there it is, it's on paper, it's got some relevance. So this is the other thing. It's surprising, isn't it, how much is actually coming into our space and our awareness, even days before we actually like hold this podcast now. It's just there, it's building and growing, and spirits are with us, all kind of excited and think, great, we're going to be doing this.
I guess what I love about it is in any inspiration for that matter, is that it gives validation, at least for me, that there's more out there than what we see in the everyday life, right? And it just kind of opens your awareness that there's possibilities, and that life and life throughout the universe can be much bigger than what we see in our everyday small circle that we encounter. Um, and honestly, COVID was good for that too, which is really weird to say because we were all stuck at home. But I think about the different people that I've met from all across the United States and in other countries as well that I would never have encountered had it not been for Zoom meetings and people wanting to connect. It's fascinating how things can happen, even the most tragic of circumstances, and still something beautiful can come out of it. And I do feel that way too when it has to do with inspiration, because we do get this beautiful gift of not only connection really with things that are beyond our everyday life. So I love that. Thank you. I'm just trying to think of some other ways that I could kind of inspire people to think about how this happens to them and they don't even think about it. Right. So I think of a lot of times too, when I wasn't in this space, how many times you've thought of someone, right? You happen to be cleaning or you're just doing your everyday thing, and all of a sudden somebody just pops in your mind and you think, I really should call them. And then what happens? They always either say, I was thinking about you too, or I'm going through something. And I love that type of inspiration as well. And I think a lot of people could probably identify with something like that. Can you think of anything else that you would, if you were to describe somebody, how maybe they are inspired every single day, what would come to your mind as an example that might help them understand how inspiration works?
I feel that everybody experiences it in different ways, and it's a podcast like this that will actually help people because we're just talking about it in an ordinary way. And basically, it's really just being so focused on something, whether it's cleaning or anything else, that your focus is there. But it's kind of like that's where the focus is, and the mind just moves out of the way and enough to leave that space for something to come in. We've all had those intuitive thoughts. I must phone something, I must do that. Oh, and even sometimes if something's really a problem and you don't know how to solve it, it's either in that subliminal stage of being partly awake, partly asleep, or when you're focused on something else, that it leaves the space. It's almost like lifting you up, parking you to one side and saying, here's the gift, here's how to resolve a situation, try this. It's not telling you what to do, it's just planting a seed thought in, well, I could try that. I mean, that's happened to me many times. I was in a dilemma once about whether to move up north with her husband's job and everything at the time, and how on earth we were going to do it because the house was facing negative equity. And then suddenly it was actually so audible, this voice, it was clairaudient in such a way, it was like somebody standing at the side of me, and they just made this suggestion to take up something that we'd been offered to do that. And then that was it. It was kind of so straightforward. Whereas all the sort of preambling and the thoughts and everything else that was going around mishmash in my head had been totally unhelpful. But this was clear as day, and that happens to a lot of people, I feel. They just don't always think about it as being in an altered state, that it's just it's intuition or a gut feeling, or oh, I knew that. Even if they haven't acted on something, there's still that feeling afterwards, well, I knew that.
I used to call them dishes meditation because as soon as I'd start doing the dishes or vacuuming or anything that was mindless, it's like all of a sudden all these thoughts would just come in. And I used to think, well, it's probably because I'm so busy that I never really give time for those things to come in through inspiration and thought. So that leads to something else I wanted to discuss. I feel like when people say, well, how do I know I'm being inspired? Or how could I improve my ability to be inspired? And obviously, some of the things we've talked about are very helpful, being able to set that consciousness aside. But I also feel like a lot of it has to do with where you put your attention, right? What meaning you associate with different things. So my friend and I happen to be talking about angel numbers, right? So those are repeating numbers that people often see, and then they'll give importance to it. It'll, a certain 111 will mean something to them, and maybe 222 will mean something else. And it's funny because I was talking to her and I said, there's two things about that I find interesting. First of all, when I first saw or heard people talking about that type of inspiration, I thought to myself, well, why did I never see that? Like, never. I've never seen that. And as soon as I said that, then it started happening. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And two, we do tend to call them angel numbers, but the practice or the title hasn't been around terribly long. So it's interesting that we would title it that, because certainly I think a lot of people would think that type of being has been here a lot longer than how long we've been calling it angel numbers. But I feel like those that try to inspire us, whether that be consciousness, beings, etc., will try to find the path of least resistance. And if you're putting importance on something like a set of numbers, they're like, oh, well, okay, let's try that. And if you give some sort of meaning to it, then it seems like it keeps happening, right? I've taught that in a class once before. I've taught classes on how to communicate with different spirit beings. And that's one thing that I have found, is that if you give importance to something, and when it happens, you recognize that it happened, give thanks, just be grateful that was so kind for that message to come through. But if you really give it importance and continue to focus, it keeps happening, and it's beautiful. Has there ever been anything like that for you, where you've just noticed all of a sudden certain things were happening repeatedly?
Yes, I've had periods of times where I find that I'm rolling numbers, and there was somebody I know that was very much into numerology, and she'd been talking to me about it. And I was even standing putting fuel in the car one day, and I was watching the numbers go round on the machine, and I'm thinking, stop it, because I was rolling a number. This is getting obsessive. But I've been seeing a lot of three lots of numbers and that coming in, and I was just thinking before, oh yes, it was only before I came on here I thought saw 333,
Right.
and so there's a lot of that. But also with the signs and messages like that, sometimes when things have been a bit of a puzzle, it's surprising where you'll see a message. You'll suddenly see the words on the back of a car, um, or on a truck. I had one years ago where I was going through a situation where I didn't know where I was going to live. I hadn't got a job, and everything was changing all at once. And on the back of this car in front of me, in big jagged letters, were "no fear." And I think, well, that was telling me no fear. But of course, the events unfolded and I still went through the human side of the fear. But with hindsight, looking back on it all, I can see how different things unfolded at a time and how the journey unfolded. And if it hadn't been for the human aspect, thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do?
Right.
And I had that level of trust, it'd have been no fear. You're taken care of.
Yeah, I love that you stopped. You stopped and gave attention to whatever it was, because I just feel like that's the thing. That's the key, is that you give importance to it, and then it keeps developing.
And I think we tend to learn the hard way, so to speak, though, because there was another situation before that where, again, I was getting divorced and I didn't know what I was going to do and all the rest of it. And I kept seeing these particular flowers. They were on the Healing magazine. They were on somewhere else. I met a friend at a cafe and they were growing in the garden. And I said, I don't know what we're going to do. We suddenly had this thought about going somewhere to speak to somebody. And
Right.
it transpired that in this area, there was a cottage to rent. But it took until I was stood inside the cottage in front of the fireplace to recognise the cottage was the name of the flowers. And you think, they've been telling me and showing me. And all of a
Exactly.
sudden, all the anxiety disappeared, and there's this golden light even around my two children. What were they going to do because of the move would affect them on where we're going to live and college and uni and that. And no, it just sort of opened up the golden pathway and away we went.
I think a lot of people, right, in the beginning, those things they can kind of identify and go, okay, well, maybe I could develop my intuition, or understand that there's other ways that I could be inspired or receive messages, that type of thing. I do see that usually another step that a lot of people, not always, but sometimes will do, is they'll move on to maybe tools, right? Like tarot cards, or I have a funny story. So I'll show you really quickly. I have what we call dowsing rods here in the US, right?
Oh,
Um,
yes, yeah.
yeah. And so I started using these and they were working great. You usually get a yes or a no, or I don't know, or maybe. The downside to them is that if it's a little bit yes, well, it's still going to say yes, or if it's a little bit no. So it's not really specific. And then, and I always did it with one particular guide that I have. And I noticed that all of a sudden they weren't doing it anymore. They would just kind of like go off in different directions. And I just got really frustrated. I'm like, oh, I guess this is it. This isn't going to work anymore. Um, and I don't know, something not long ago made me think, I wonder if they were trying to say something more than yes or no, because it started looking like I was landing a plane. We're all over the place. And so I started asking, I'm like, okay, if I give you a question or something that I'd like to be inspired about, give me something, right? And I noticed there was a pattern. There were different positions that they would make with these instruments to tell me something. And so I just started documenting what it might mean for me. In fact, I'll show you what I do. I basically just document, the position, and then I write down what the message was. And I can't tell you how accurate it's been. It's just, but it's so fun to do. And I just laugh every time we do it, because I'll get hit with the stick sometimes if they're being funny. Hit me with the stick. And then we'll do the little thing. And I'll like, okay, did I get that right? And so they'll do it again, the exact same position. So that's one fun thing, that people can do. Tarot cards, there's different types of tools and exploration that as you work along your way of development, and developing your intuition. So, what would you say, aside from writing, has there ever been anything else that you've used in those first developing? And the thing is we can stick with those tools the rest of our lives. I'm probably always will use this now because it's so fun. But do you have anything else that you do besides inspirational writing or artwork?
Um, I at the very beginning, I started off. It was after my son was going to school, and I started off. It's always been around me to do something or another, and you couldn't get hold of tarot cards as easily as you can now. They're everywhere. Back in the day, over in the UK anyway, they weren't. And so I sent away for some because I wasn't able to get into London at the time where I'd have been able to buy some. So I started looking through the book there, but I actually found it was really difficult to go with the interpretation of the tarot cards. And it was only years later somebody said to me when I went on a course, you're reading these clairvoyantly, not as in the story, as in the interpretation in the book sort of thing. So that made sense. So I used those, and I just use them as an image at a glance, really. And they're just like the kickstart and away where I go with them.
Yeah.
I've used crystals and stones, and I've done the sand readings and all sorts of stuff in these open development groups over the years. And then you can move into your psychometry. And it's just different experiences, isn't it, for people where we start to use our senses in other ways. And it's only when we try these things. I mean, psychometry used to fill me with a certain amount of dread. Oh, we're doing psychometry next week, or photograph readings. But it's surprising, isn't it? We just don't realize that actually you've only got to pick up on something in like a photograph, somebody's smile or a look in the eye or a type of the demeanor of either the clothes or the manner that they're standing. And you start with that and it just runs away. So
Yeah.
yeah, try anything. As they say, you could read entrails and anything else if you wanted to, going back in the ancient days.
Exactly. Well, that's a good example that it has been obviously working for people for a very long time. So it's not like we're reinventing the wheel, although I do feel that way a little bit with this. But definitely. And I love the way that you said that it's like a starting point because it really is. If you're developing your intuition and trying to receive those messages, sometimes that's all we need is just one to get the mind out of the way or just have a starting point and then you're off down the path. What would you say some of the other things that you do you well I believe you do mediumship, that type of thing. Do you feel like you're inspired in a different way when you do those types of practices?
Mediumship, the way that generally works, and this is what surprised me when I first started coming online, is that I could see, because I tend to be very visual, I could see spirit at that time. I mean, it's changing how we work all the time, but I could see them very clearly in the living room here. And so I could go into the description, and that was also covering a period where there was very much like a points list of all the things we were supposed to come up with, but gradually that shifted and changed, and we go into the feel as well of the person now.
Mhm.
But I'm quite fortunate in the way that I'm able to see, sense, and feel in different ways than I hear. And because they change the way of working, isn't it amazing, Melissa, where you think you're just getting comfortable with how you're working? And that's the very point when it flips and they're just going to try something new with you. How do you get on with that?
Exactly. That just happened just this last weekend. I'm the same. I see things. I usually see beings. And so for me, that's really helpful because a lot of times I'll say yes, no. So it's like, thank you. That's very helpful. But just this weekend, all of a sudden I saw nothing and I kept getting random words. And I'm like, okay, I guess we'll just trust it. Just write down as they come. And of course, when you ask people, especially if you're in a gallery setting, and for those of you that aren't familiar with that, that's usually where you are online and there are several people there that the message could possibly be for. And you ask, does this, resonate with anyone? And they all go, they look at you like, no, no. And you're like, well, I think I was, but eventually, usually, not always, but usually you'll find the person that message is meant for. But it is a bit of a wild ride when they decide to mix it up.
I think that's part of learning to trust, isn't it? Because they tried one with me where they would say one word and then they would say, we're not saying anything else until you say this one word. And so we did that, like check fabric or something like this, which then moved into a raincoat, and then it moved on further, and it was about somebody who used to work in a factory who used to make raincoats, and so that took us into the spirit and everything like that. So I think it's also about pushing us. And I know some people say they're working as hard. I'm not sure that I like that terminology really, but I feel it's a way of exploring other avenues of giving us the information or leading us into the links somehow, whether it's through music. That was one I had over the last fortnight where I just had about 3 songs to start with, and I'm thinking, whoa, I don't usually start like this, but and away we go, see what happens. So it's an adventure really, and I think if we look at it on a lighter side, it's quite fun once we move our anxiety out the way. The trick is shifting the anxiety out and thinking, oh, it's all fine. Well, it's easy to say but not always easy to feel sometimes.
Exactly. It's like being an explorer. I think I had a teacher one time that used that term. Just think of it as a fun exploration and let go of, judging yourself and could this be wrong? It's like, no, we're just discovering. We're just discovering where this could possibly go. I feel like, within our own bodies, we have energy and information. And I always find it interesting when a being, we'll say maybe somebody that's passed or a spirit guide, will use something that it's just completely random, but it will make you say a word or it will make you think of something. And I'm just always fascinated that they have that ability to see what experiences we have and what we might associate something with. Even in dreams, we were talking about that earlier, even in dreams that people have had throughout history and have analyzed. Usually it's some sort of imagery that they're able to interpret in some way. I've yet to see, and I'm sure it possibly could happen, but I've yet to see where you're giving something and it's like, there's no way I'm going to figure that out because it's not something you would encounter or had ever encountered. And yeah, it can be interesting. Although I do sometimes find we talk about giving attention to something. Sometimes the more I talk about it or I just kind of play with it a little bit, it's like more will come. It's like even if it is unusual and something that I'm like, well, maybe that's the message. There's something I'm supposed to notice that unusual thing and just mention it. Yeah, I always find that fascinating how information can come through, right? So maybe you'll just suddenly know something, right? It'll just pop in your head, or you'll hear something. That's not as common, but I do every once in a while. Like one time I was laying on a taking a nap and I just heard a doorbell and it sounded just like my grandparents' doorbell. It was like these really big chimes. And I knew my doorbell did not sound that way. I'm like, okay, that's unusual. Or you feel things. So that's another thing that I have taught people sometimes too, if they're particularly clairsentient, um, because it's just this random thing that happened. I happen to be doing a certain program. They were talking about feelings that you have within your body and giving attention to it and whatever that particular program was. But with the guide that I was working with, they kind of noticed that I was really paying attention. So I notice now when I have a guide that just wants my attention, they will tap me in some way. So it's like, and because I gave attention to it, right? I was like, oh, you're trying to get my attention. What is it that I can help you with? It's just fun to see how we can be inspired through different avenues. Yeah, it's really cool. All right. So if you had advice for anybody, whether they're in the beginning of their journey, middle of their journey, or they're even an advanced person when it comes to receiving inspiration, what advice would you give as far as how to really bring in those messages a little clearer than maybe you're getting right now? Maybe you're in a space where you're like, oh, I just feel like I'm kind of blocked. Has there been anything that's worked for you when things like that happen, or if you just want to experience more?
I tend to find the biggest thing that gets in the way is anxiety, because we feel as if we're meant to perform. And that goes right back to when we're first sitting in our development circles and they say, right, we're going to pair you off and you're going to have a go now. And immediately it brings in quite often that sense of anxiety. And it comes down really, and wherever you are in your mediumship and any other aspect of this, it always comes down to that word trust, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like letting go, and it is okay, and we are finding our way. It doesn't matter what stage of our development we may be at. We might have been doing mediumship, channeling, whatever, for years and years, but it's always a process of learning and letting go and trusting and knowing if we sense or feel or hear something. Just try it. We get too caught up in it should be a certain way. I'm supposed to feel or work in a certain way. Well, obviously, we start off with some guidelines, but really, at the end of the day, we have to feel and sense and know our own way and working with guides. So sit quietly, sit in the power to build your energy, sitting with your guides, but not necessarily working, just sitting and connecting with them to strengthen that. And also, just to be open and not have too many expectations. Have the intention of how you'd like to work and communicate with your guide, but just allow. I mean, in the early days, I found that it was when I was just allowing and almost again parked to one side a bit, one way or another. And I would notice something, a spirit or a guide or some standing at the side of someone. And, you either say something or you don't, depending on what the circumstances are. And there's more and more people now are becoming more and more attuned to this. And it's about integrity too. I think that's a very important word that needs to be brought into that.
Interesting. What does integrity mean to you in this spiritual space?
Being respectful,
Mhm.
respectful of working with spirit and respectful of whoever you're communicating with as either the sitter, and not necessarily prying into other people's business just because you suddenly start to see things. Well, actually, I've got a blind eye and a deaf ear when it comes to anything like that. It's only when you're asked. And yeah, that honest integrity and being respectful when you're working with somebody and mindful of where they are at with things.
I like to call it spiritual manners
Yeah,
because you're right.
I
People do
like
get
that.
excited, right? So they want to see what their friends are doing. But I'm the same way. When anybody has asked me in the past what I do, and I tell them, about my different practices, they get kind of like a little nervous. And I immediately say, I don't read people every day. Unless you've asked me to, or there's some reason that I have to look at a situation that I'm involved in, I'm not looking at anything. I really don't. I really don't, because again, I think that integrity, that spiritual manners is important. I love that we've talked about different ways that you can start out in the beginning, or if you're already in the middle, different ways that you can um, basically find some different inspirational ideas, right, on how to increase your practice. So thank you. And for anybody that's out there that is interested in inspirational writing, we'll put the link down below so that they know about your class that you have. Is there anything else that you want to direct people to before we close?
Uh, with the link, there may be at 10:30 before the inspirational writing, there was healing. If anybody wants to come along and join that for themselves and for the whole world. And so, yeah, that's all I'd like to say. Thank you
Perfect.
very much, Melissa, for inviting me onto your podcast and for, yes, giving me the opportunity. It's been lovely to have a chat and explore different ideas. Share so
Yeah.
much.
Love
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you so much.